August 6, 2015. About 2:30 in the morning, I received a call that the city of Powder Springs were in need of a major crimes team to come out and assist in a double homicide investigation. Passers-by had initially seen this vehicle and thought that they were observing a single-car motor vehicle accident. What they discovered instead is that these two young people, this young couple in their 20s, had been lured to this location by a man that was bent on armed robbery, committing an armed robbery on them. A gun battle ensued inside the car. It skidded off through this dew, the roadway, where it came to rest. Young Catherine Costner had been driving this vehicle. She was removed by first responders and passed away on the way to Kennesaw Hospital. All she could say is that he shot me. She had her father's weapon that clearly had stovepiped and became jammed as she fought with the perpetrator who was sitting in the vehicle with them. Her husband was shot in the back seat of the vehicle and he died before responders could get to the scene. And perhaps the most compelling aspect of it from my perspective before I arrived on the scene about 3:30 was the fact that young Kinsley Costner, but 3 years old, had fortunately survived this ordeal. She was not physically harmed, but you can see here, captured on this body cam video, she had to be extracted from the vehicle as well. She was a witness to her father's death, to Catherine's death, and fortunately is being raised by Catherine's parents at this point, her grandparents, and is doing very well despite some of the scars that she suffered as a result of this ordeal. The call that morning for me and for the major crimes team was actually a call for leadership. In order to solve and successfully prosecute this case, we knew that it was going to require a commitment to leadership, a commitment to teamwork, and it was going to require commitment to being able to get justice for the Costners. And so I share this kind of true crime story with you, certainly with the hopes that I'm going to capture your attention, first of all, but secondly, as a practical way of introducing what I like to call laws of leadership. And my career as a 21-year prosecutor, I believe that I've certainly tried to teach a little bit about leadership. And I hope that I can give you 3 takeaways today that I call laws of leadership that I believe are universally applicable to everything that you do, everything I do, and everything that we all do. And I couldn't agree more with some of the other speakers that I've heard today. We do need leadership now more than ever. Can everyone agree on that? I think we all can, right? Especially coming out of 2020, which was just an absolute tumultuous year for all of us in law enforcement and public safety. And so today I bring to you a leadership model. That's what we have today is laws of leadership. It's a leadership model that I hope to share with you. And it requires basically 3 commitments. So here are my 3 commitments that I give to you. First, a law of leadership is leaders commit to leadership. Okay, so that's number 1 takeaway. Leaders commit to leadership. Second law of leadership, leaders commit to teams. And the third law of leadership is that leaders commit to closing. So, first law of leadership, let's dive right into it. This is the first takeaway that I think you can have that will be instantly applicable to what you do with your profession. It's certainly applicable to what I do in my profession. And I am going to come back to this case. It was eventually solved through hard work on the part of Powder Springs Police Department and our major crimes team. 3 people were eventually arrested for these crimes and successfully prosecuted. The gunman had a 2-week jury trial. As it happens, John Robinson was the chief of police at the time. The detective on this case had never had a homicide case before. It was his very first. So that call for leadership was as much a call for support and guidance as anything else. And when you get that call at 2:30 in the morning, you better be ready to go. And I know I have some law enforcement partners in here that I've worked with over the years that can attest to the fact that when we get that call, we're ready to go. So the first law of leadership is what I call leaders' commitment to leadership. That may sound redundant, but it's not intended to be. What I'm really talking about here is what some of the other speakers have talked about as well. It's a commitment to learning. See, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. And if we want to be better leaders, we need to be better learners. And it's a great quote by JFK regarding that. I absolutely agree that it is our fundamental obligation in public safety to be better designed and equipped to be learning about leadership and its importance, and more importantly, to share it as well. And start with purpose. This sounds like something you've heard throughout the day, huh? And by the way, the little clue here, if you see more than one speaker at a leadership conference talking about the same book, might be a clue that you should pick up the book and start thinking about it. You can get it on Audible too. If you guys aren't readers, you can listen to it in the car. It's a great book. And I couldn't agree more. So I like to think as a practical matter as a prosecutor, though. So here's my practical scenario that I have for you. This has all happened to you guys. It's going to happen maybe tomorrow or next weekend or whatever. You're at a barbecue or a social event or something like that, and inevitably you meet somebody new, right? A friend of your spouse or your significant other or whatever, and you're having a beer or whatever, and you get to that question. So what do you do? Okay, so what do you do, all right? Well, you guys could say that you write tickets, right? I don't think that that's really capturing what you do. Just like I could say, I prosecute offenders, I go to court, I take pleas, I have trials, right? That doesn't really capture the essence of what I do as a prosecutor, and I think that's a really poor answer. It's not factually inaccurate, is it? Just like it's not factually inaccurate for you all to say, well, we write tickets and respond to calls for service. But it doesn't account for that 2:30 in the morning phone call and that 3:30 crime scene, right? By the way, you always end the conversation by being polite and turning around and say, what do you do, right? Because that's what good conversationalists do. So we're going to come back to that answer, and I think I can give you a better one as I close this out when we get to my third law of leadership, which is the leader's commitment to closing. And let's see if we can find a better answer that more aptly captures what we do. So yes, one of the things that we need to be learning in this first law of leadership, a leader's commit to leadership, which is a commitment to learning, is learning your why. And you get there by studying your values and your purpose. We've all got to be studying our values or our purpose. Because you can have the best vision in the world, right? But if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to have the favorable win. And by the way, this is not new stuff. What I love about the study of leadership as you really get into it is that these discussions and these thoughts have been going on for centuries. This is a quote from Seneca, involving, in my opinion, vision. And the fact that if you have no idea where you're going, if you don't know what your purpose is, then you're never going to be able to get there. The best leaders who commit to leadership, which is a commitment to learning, face adversity head on. The best leaders I know see adversity as an opportunity because crisis is revealing. And the best leaders that I've ever seen in my career are the ones that can take crisis, take a deep breath, and somehow in that 3:30 in the morning, no suspect crime scene, step back and say, how are we going to get this solved as a team, right? How are we going to get this done as a team? And as the SEALs are apt to say, find strength in adversity. It's a great quote from the U.S. Navy SEALs, right? We're all going to face adversity. And if you're a good leader and into the study of leadership, you're going to be better equipped when adversity comes to be able to overcome. And in fact, I think what you're going to find is that your personal best leadership experience, we all have one, right? If you're asked, what's your personal best leadership experience? Probably it involves some adversity. It involved a tough time. It involved a situation where you had to overcome. It involved an unknown suspect that fled into the night with 2 dead bodies and a poor young 3-year-old girl who needed help, right? Because the best leaders are the ones that see challenge and adversity as an opportunity to adapt and to achieve. So going back to our case, the learning was really important here. The lead detective, as I said, he was a great guy. He's now the chief of police in New Harley and a fantastic leader. But he also was a very humble man, too, which is great. He's like, Jesse, I've never done geolocation analysis before. This case got solved with geolocation analysis. Let's do it together. That's what teams do. Let's jump in this together. I happen to have some experience with that. Get me the records, and I'll work on it with you, right? That's what leaders do. We learn. We learn about geolocation information. We learn about ballistics, and we share. And the best leaders, law number 1, commit to leadership, which is a commitment to learning. And when you know what your why is and you know what your vision is, our vision in this particular case was to somehow get to that point where we were standing in a courtroom getting the victims an opportunity to come and share their victim impact statements. Always be looking for that finish line. Here's a screen capture of Catherine's mother after the conviction of the man who killed her daughter, giving her victim impact statement about how this crime had impacted her. When you're dialed into your purpose, you can face adversity. You can face the challenges of the people that fled and did this. And you can get to that closing point where you're able to provide that victim a voice. And after that conviction, I'll give you the spoiler. You didn't think I would talk about a case we lost, right? I'm going to pick one that we won. So there was a nice little text that I got from Catherine's father, and it was simple. Thank you. Thank you. Catherine is smiling now with a photograph of his daughter and his granddaughter who he's now raising. These photos hung on my door for years as a reminder to my team and I on how important leadership and commitment to team actually are. So that's the first law of leadership that I share with you, okay? Leaders commit to leadership, which is a commitment to learning. The second one is leaders commit to teams. And again, this is not a new concept. Look at what Eisenhower said about the Allied invasion of Europe. He said basically, great leaders above all build teams. For a fantastic book on this, check out Team of Teams. I like to source my material. In Team of Teams, General McChrystal talked about the importance of pushing power out rather than commanding by fiat. It was command by negation. Basically, go until I say no. Just keep me in the loop. And pushing the power out to see how great things can be accomplished. Because the simple fact is, when you strengthen your pack, right? The strength of the pack is the wolf. The strength of the wolf is the pack, right? When you strengthen your weaker links, your whole team becomes stronger. I'm glad that our prior speaker just mentioned Lencioni. One of my favorite books from Lencioni is called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So how do you start by building teams? I hate to say this. It's not going to be popular. It starts with meetings. I know all of you have woken up at times and you've looked at your phone and said, oh my God, I've got 20 meetings today. This is not what I wanted to do. Well, I'll tell you why if you're saying that, it's because your meetings suck. Okay, I'm being honest. So you need to make your meetings more dynamic. You need to make your meetings better, and you can do that. The first thing I'll tell you is I always have a full table. I insist on not just me and my partner meeting. I have my victim advocates meet with me. My administrative assistant meets with me. Everybody that's a part of the team. I have the lead detective meet with me. We're all part of this team together, so we have a full table. Because when you do that, you don't just communicate, you over-communicate and eliminate the gaps. You eliminate the gaps in coverage by bringing everybody to the table. And once you get that commitment, you'll see results as well. So people sometimes bristle at the idea that I'm supposed to have everybody on my team at these meetings. Well, I use my Falcons. We heard some Patriot stuff earlier this morning. I'll balance it out with a horrible team, my Falcons that crush my dreams every year, right? You don't see when the Falcons go on the field, the wide receivers huddle over here, and the running backs huddle over here, and the linemen huddle over here, right? If you're going to eliminate the gaps in coverage, you're going to all huddle up together. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. So let me give you a short story about the importance of teams and how important team meetings are. It involves a cold case that started on June 3rd of 2016. The victim was kidnapped from Atlanta and forced at gunpoint up into Cobb County. He was taken to an ATM where he was beat. This is him in the yellow shirt. Forced to withdraw $300 by one of the perpetrators standing behind him. Here's another screen capture of that. Before he was marched to the woods and he was executed. When we found him a week later, we thought, well, this case is going to get solved really quickly because we have this great bolo that we can put out, right? And unfortunately, that didn't happen. 1 week went, 2 weeks, months, years went by, no leads. Until one day, a former teammate of ours came back to visit our office, and she was talking to Kristen Birch, my victim advocate, so not an investigator, not a prosecutor, a victim advocate. And she was saying what she did with the Attorney General's office. She said, I try to identify sex trafficking victims online. We said, well, how do you do that? She said, there's a great new facial recognition software called Clearview, and we can identify the victims that way. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm messing around on my phone, because I'm always messing around on my phone. And Kristen Birch, my victim advocate, who 3 years prior had been a part of a meeting where we talked about this case, said, hey, Jess, I wonder if we could solve that unsolved 2016 cold case, right? If we got a subscription to Clearview facial recognition. Hit me like a lightning bolt. But I wasn't even thinking, this wasn't even in my noggin, right? So within 12 hours, I called our lead detectives. I wanted to learn more on how it works. So here's an example. Our detective actually, that little round picture in the bottom is him using his phone to put my face online to see what public images were out there. And man, yeah, actually the upper left hand on the left-hand side, that's the picture of me standing with the Costner's mom, right? Right? That's her. And the one in the upper right where I look like I'm laboring pretty heavy, that's a 5K picture I'd never seen before. Had no idea that it existed. I ran by a camera. Somebody took that out there. I had no idea that photograph was even out there. So getting back to our case, right, within 12 hours, I said, hey, lead detective, Phil Stoddard with Cobb Police, can you get me those images? He got them to Detective Ed Stockinger within 6 seconds. 6 seconds, 3 years later, of putting that perpetrator's face in there, we found bookends from the day of the crime where he had fled from police in Alabama and wrecked his vehicle, and they recovered the murder weapon out there. My point in saying this headline, police arrest suspects in 2016 cold case, while I'm proud to have been a part of that prosecution and investigation, I did not solve that case. Who did? A teammate, a victim advocate, who, by the way, is forbidden from saying it's not my responsibility. That advocate takes ownership for our team, right? That's ownership. And when you have ownership, we're all invested in the outcome. So I think that meetings matter. And if you're doing it the right way, you're going to eliminate the gaps. My simple model is we always have a setup. We talk about hows and whats. How are we going to present geolocation analysis at the trial? Are we going to flip co-defendants? I invite conflict. Are we going to call Kinsley to the stand? Is it going to be more damaging to her than good for us in the case, right? These are all discussions that we all had a part of. My administrative assistant, the lead detective, victim advocates. We decided not to call her. We could prosecute the case without her. But these are all things that we discussed. And then I always want to close with leadership. Why? Because as was stated earlier, the growth and development of people is the highest calling of leadership. So I'm going to give you some quick takeaways on how you can close with leadership. Most of these are free. So everybody here prior to this done some sort of leadership development? I would assume that most people have. Did you enjoy it? Just show of hands if you did have done something prior today. Okay, not too many hands. How about this? Are any of you doing leadership development within your organization now? Okay, I see only far less hands. Good to see some hands, but far less. Let me give you some easy examples of how you can institute leadership within your organization. Personality tests. Everyone here, anyone done a Myers-Briggs test or DISC training? Yeah. Did you learn something about yourself? I sure did, right? I learned that, man, I've got some issues sometimes, right? Hey, do you know what the personality of your teammate is? Okay? Only some of you. You know what? If you get your whole team to do personality tests, what you're going to find is you can better deal with them, especially the tricky teammates, right? Because you know now that they think differently than you. You can do these free online. So I had my whole team go through and do that. Book club. I call it the Leaders Book Club. I've probably given out 50 copies of the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team over my career. My new office with Paulding, I've already given out probably 10 there because it's a leadership fable and it's fascinating and you can learn so much about leadership from reading books. We even took 2 hours off during the workday from 3 to 5 to go and have a social to be able to talk about that book and see what we can learn from it. During the pandemic, to stay connected to each other, while a lot of us were remote, we started what I call the TED Talk Challenge. Every week, somebody would pick a new TED Talk or podcast, and we would share it, and we'd have a discussion. I love the Mission Statement Challenge. This was perhaps my favorite one that we did. So what we did is we had a facilitated discussion about what our top core values as individuals is. And it was really fascinating to see. So, for example, my detective, Ed Stockinger, who I've known for years, we've literally walked over bodies together as investigating crime scenes and stuff. Known him for years. Had no idea that he is a dance dad and that his top priority is family. Top priority is family. My top one happened to be honor. Just by doing this little exercise where we said, well, identify your top 5 values and let's share that, and then set that aside, now we're going to do something different. You all identify the top values of the major crimes and cold case team. Just think about it, give you a week, bring back those top values to me. Let's see if you all can turn that into a mission statement for our team. Let me tell you some of the words that came back. Justice, honor, compassion, integrity, dedication, service, public safety, law enforcement, and crime victims. Wow, what awesome values that this team had. And you'll see they were so proud of it that my administrative assistant even put it on a board that hung above our office. And if you do it right, when you even switch out teammates, those values should be pretty universal. So if you're thinking about doing a mission statement, that's a good way to do it. I'd love to help facilitate. You just let me know. You'll have my contact information. Because what I found, we're still in leaders commit to teams, right? Leaders commit to teams. Is if you don't care who gets the credit, great things can be accomplished. I hope somebody here knows Kristen Birch and will send her a text and tell her that I've said something nice about her because she deserves it, right? If you don't care who gets the credit, great things can be accomplished, such as solving cold cases or tracking down suspects who brutally shoot 2 people in a car and rob a young child of their parents. So in this case, we had 14 different agencies spanning an investigation of 2 weeks. We had 3 simultaneous SWAT raids that had to be accomplished in order to apprehend the defendants. Eventually, we had a team meeting to discuss flipping 2 of the co-defendants, which we ultimately decided to do, leaving only the shooter going on trial in what ended up being about a 2.5-week trial. Which brings me nicely to my third and final law of leadership for you. Leaders commit to closing, okay? Leaders commit to closing. And I'm careful to choose that word because as a prosecutor, I'm always thinking about closing argument. Like, I got into prosecution because I watched Law and Order in the heyday, and I decided that I wanted to be just like those people on Law and Order, right? I wanted to stand in the courtroom and do a closing argument, right? You all got into police work because you probably saw a TV show, or maybe you have somebody in your family and you thought that would be great. But I'm not really talking entirely about closing argument here. I'm talking about legacy, which has been talked about quite a bit today. I'm talking about thinking about the end game. I'm talking about thinking about your purpose and your legacy. What's your legacy going to be? You know, I'm very proud of the fact that when I walked away from the Cobb County DA's office recently, part of my legacy is that I built a successor who now holds that mission statement challenge in her office above her door as a reminder to that team to stay true to what our values are. And then when you get to that point of closing, take command of it. For me, when does closing argument begin? ABC rule, always be closing. For me, it's always be closing, right? And it actually started here on a crime scene at 3:30 in the morning before I even knew who the perpetrator was. Because we were all dialed in and huddled up on this morning saying to each other, we're going to get there together. We're going to get to that closing together. I'm going to stand there as your advocate in court, law enforcement officer, and we're going to get there together. But we got to commit to getting to that point. And so as I begin to wind down here, I encouraged our team during this case, using it as a platform to stay true to our why. We knew that it was important that we'd have to learn together, whether it's geolocation, pathology, firearms, child witnesses. We believe that teams can triumph. We made our meetings matter. We faced a lot of adversity head on. And despite the burdens, we knew that there would be an opportunity at some point to be able to stand up on behalf of our victims and try to give them a voice in court. And so here in this little screen capture, you can actually see Jody Matthews, the detective, now a police chief himself, seated behind me as I deliver part of the closing argument. You can see Catherine's mom and the blonde here close to the jury box. My advocate that I told you about who solved the 2016 cold case is seated right beside her because we go to court as a team. And we knew that we could encourage each other and get to that end zone that we needed to if we committed to and worked as a team and stayed true to closing and leaving a positive legacy for Kinsley and the Costners. You see, the fact of the matter is that the best leaders remind their teams how to stay driven to their purpose. And so today, as I again kind of wrap this up, I told you a story that you probably never heard of before. There was no dateline on this one. There's no 2020, right? That's not why we do what we do, right? That's not why we are out there doing. There was no ticker tape parade or anything like that. But I tell you this story because of this. When people ask me, when do you think you and your team are at your best? This is one of hundreds of cases that I think of, and one where I feel particularly proud that our teams were committed to leadership, committed to team, and committed to closing, and that we could accomplish great things. And so I ask you today, what's your leadership story? What's your leadership story, and have you shared it with somebody else? Because here's the fact of the matter. There's a 100% chance that you can make a difference in other people's lives. There's a 100% chance that you can make a difference in other people's lives. And I believe if you commit to leadership, because leaders learn, you commit to team, because empowered teams triumph. And if you commit to commanding your closing, thinking about your purpose and your legacy, great things can be accomplished. And so I leave you with some questions to ponder. What if today you made a commitment to being a better leader? What if today you made a commitment to making your department a better place? What if today you made a commitment to empower your teammates, push the power out? What if today you made a commitment to giving purpose to your team by thinking about your values and what we do? And what if tomorrow you committed to being an even better leader than you are today? When you do those things, maybe the answer to the question at that barbecue or that social event changes a little bit, right? So we're going to come back to now what my response might be if somebody asks me, what do I do? Well, for me, I'm a prosecutor. My team and I serve. We serve law enforcement, public safety, and crime victims. I get to work with inspired leaders who choose to make a difference. We are a team dedicated to seeking justice with honor, integrity, and compassion. Sure, we go to crime scenes, courtrooms, and it's really hard work. We face adversity head on each day. And in fact, we believe we are at our very best when we are challenged. While the burdens are great, so are the opportunities. And we know and we believe that we can make a difference in other people's lives. How about you? You see, there's a 100% chance that you can make a difference in other people's lives. And the choice is yours today. If you choose leadership, if you choose to make a difference, if you choose to collaborate, to empower, to strengthen those around you, and to inspire those you work with, great things can happen. For me, my team and I, we choose to commit to developing leaders. My call to action for you is, how about you? I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to you today.